Okay, if everyone is ready, we're going to begin with Commissioner Frank Strada will make his official statement. The victim's family will have a statement. They will not take questions, and then the official media witnesses will speak, and you can ask questions of the official media witnesses. Commissioner Strada.
Good morning. Following the U.S. Supreme Court ruling and upon consultation with the Tennessee Attorney General's office, the governor determined that it was lawful to carry out the jury sentence of death given to Mr. Black. Therefore, today, by order of the Tennessee Supreme Court, the Department of Correction carried out the death sentence of Byron Lewis Black by means of lethal injection at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. Inmate Black was pronounced dead at 10:43. He had no last words. This concludes my statement.
Good morning. My name is Abigail Geyer. I'm with TDOC Victim Services, and I will be making a statement on behalf of the victim's family. The statement is from Lynette Bell. I thank God for this day, a day that was a long time coming. 37 years is too long, and it's not our fault. He got to take that up with the Master, the Redeemer. He brought this on himself. I am thankful and grateful to see this day, the load and burden that has been lifted off our hearts, not just me, but my family with me. I thank God for making this happen. His family is going through the same thing now that we went through 37 years ago. I can't say I'm sorry because we never got an apology. He never apologized, and he never admitted it, even on his dying bed, that he took it to his grave with him, and he knows he did it. And this is closure for my family. My sister and her 2 daughters can finally rest in peace. This statement is from Marie Amelia Bell. I thank the Lord for letting me be here to see this closure. I hope that we can be in peace from this day forward. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Catherine Sweeney. I'm the health reporter at WPLN. We entered into the witness chamber before the execution started and before the curtains were open. That's how the protocol works. While the curtains were still closed at 10:31, the mic came on. They did a mic check. That's mostly because at the last execution we couldn't hear very well, and so they made some improvements, and that was very obvious. It was much clearer and much louder than at the last execution. There was some static, and then we heard his spiritual advisor tell him to focus on his breath and comfort him. Again, that was at 10:31. The curtain opened shortly after at 10:31. There was a sheet over him, which is normal. It was pulled up significantly higher than it was on Oscar Franklin Smith. It was over his hands. He had no last statement. He was facing the witnesses in the other chamber. There are 2. So he was facing the one that had family in it. The attorneys and the rest of the press and I were in another one, and he was perpendicular to us. The clergy had her hand on his face and was comforting him. He began breathing loudly and sighing. At this point, if the protocol was followed correctly, the medication would be administered as this was happening through a line coming out of a channel in the wall. He began raising his head and looking around. At 10:33, he was sighing heavily. He told his advisor, "It's hurting so bad," and she said, "I'm so sorry." He was groaning in pain, saying, "whew," a lot. At 10:34, one of the TDOC workers pulled the sheet back some. His hands were revealed. They were taped as they were last time, seemingly with kinesiology tape. That makes it hard to notice if the fingers were trembling. That's sometimes a sign of distress. At 10:34, he was still groaning and raised his head. Again at 10:35, There was some kind of sound I couldn't make out at 10:35 that could be water or clicking, I'm not sure. By 10:36, he became very still. They put the rock out, or the item, I'm not sure what it is, out at 10:36. That's to imply that the medication has been fully administered and the 5-minute waiting period has started. At 10:38, there was some kind of a mechanical sound. The window closed at 10:41, and the doctor came in and certified death at 10:43.
If I may, with your experience with this, the last execution and this one, what were the noticeable differences? Obviously, there's the implant that's different, but it seems like you were noticing some differences in reaction.
There were definitely differences in reaction. Oscar Franklin Smith was very vocal. He was talking throughout that moment, criticizing the governor, making a lot of more political statements about the justice system. Byron Black was not making statements. He was not vocal. He was showing signs of distress. Oscar Franklin Smith did not, in our experience. Oscar Franklin Smith wasn't panting or sighing or making any of these kinds of sounds that Byron Black did during his execution today. We'll be taking questions after the rest of us, so thank you.
I'm Hope Salmon with Fox 17 News. At 10:14, we got into the room, and it was dark at first. Slowly, we began hearing that there was some murmuring. After a while, we noticed that it was somebody praying. At 10:31, we heard a woman say, "Focus on your breathing." And then around that same time, it was asked, "Byron Black, do you have any last statement?" He replied, "No, sir." The spiritual leader then had her hand on his cheek, and you could see that he was doing a lot of heavy breathing. He was looking up. He seemed to just not really know what was going on, head going back up and down. He was giving a deep breath, and then as his breathing continued, he said at some point, "This is hurting so bad." That was near 10:33. He was doing a lot more deep breaths, and he was letting a lot of sighs like this. He continued doing that for a while, and then around 10:35, I stopped seeing his chest going up and down the way that it was. Then at 10:36, before the spiritual leader started praying again, we saw the rock come out as the spiritual leader was praying over him. She was praying for his soul. She continued praying for all of the victims. She prayed for his life, and she kind of concluded with the Lord's Prayer. And at 10:43, we heard over the speaker after the curtain was shut that he was pronounced dead, and they closed the curtain at 10:41.
Good morning, Tori Gessner, WKRN. My notes are very similar. We went back in the room about 10:14. When the curtains were closed and the room was dark, you could hear a lot of praying from the spiritual advisor, not much from Byron Black. At 10:31, the curtains opened and he was lying horizontally with a yellow robe, white sheet over him, strapped in to the gurney. The spiritual advisor was telling him, "Focus on your breath." As he was heavily breathing, multiple times he lifted up his head, kind of like, I don't know what he was doing, lifting up his head. But I have about 3 times where he did that. At 10:33, he mumbled a little and then said, "It's hurting so bad." Let's see what else. Yeah, lots of moaning and huffing and puffing. And at 10:36, the rock was placed. The spiritual advisor did mention the victims by name multiple times in prayer. What else? I totally missed when they asked him for his last words. That's how quickly it happened. And yeah, 10:43, time of death. I will say I witnessed Oscar Smith's execution back in May, I believe, and there were definitely clearer, audible signs of distress from what I witnessed. But that's what I got.
Hi, I'm Nikki Hauser. I'm with News Channel 5. A lot of what I'm going to say is the same, but I'm going to talk about the moments that really stood out to me. One of them was the last words. We were in that room for about 10 minutes, and about 30 seconds in, they asked for last words. He said, "No, sir." And they got the thing started. The spiritual advisor was with him the entire time. They seemed to have a really close relationship. She touched him on the cheek for a good amount of time, about a minute. It was there while she said, "I'm going to lay my hands on you in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit." He kept taking very deep breaths. His head did go up a couple times and then back down on the sheet. I'm going to repeat this part because it feels critically important. At one point, he does lift up and he says, "I can't do this." Maybe whispers, but it was audible. There was a beat, and then he said something along the lines of, "It hurts so bad." The spiritual advisor replied to him, "I'm so sorry." And he audibly gasped or made a sound out loud after that. She proceeds to sing, "The Lord is my shepherd." At one point, they readjusted his sheet. I'm not sure why that happened or why that was the case. And as things go on, similar to what everybody else was saying, a lot of deep breaths, we were trying to understand what that meant. It was clear that something was happening to him that he may be reacting to. His feet were moving at some point, and he did keep bringing his head back up and then down. Those were the main signs that I saw as drugs were being administered around 10:35, 10:36. I didn't see any more movement, and that was around the same time that they brought a rock out to, I believe, indicate that the administering was over or something along those lines. Like someone else said, the spiritual advisor went along and mentioned that they're praying not only for his soul, but for the souls of Angela, Latoya, Lakeisha, that they rest in peace. That praying went on for another 5 to 10 minutes. She said the Our Father, and the time of death was at 10:43. And then shortly after that, we saw the spiritual advisor come into our room where we were viewing, and she had a long hug with somebody. Those are my notes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kelly Puente with the Tennessean. I don't have too much more to add, but I will say that Byron Black did appear to show visible signs of distress. He moaned at times, had deep breaths. At 10:33, he did murmur to his spiritual advisor something along the lines of, "This is hurting so bad," and she replied, "I'm sorry." She was trying to calm him, telling him to take deep breaths. At 10:34, he lifted his head up and moved back and forth, and around about 10:36, he appeared to lose signs of consciousness.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Mattice with the Associated Press. I'll echo what everyone else has said, but just to go over some of my recollections. We entered the execution room, witness room at 10:14. It was dark. We could hear a spiritual advisor praying in the background. It wasn't completely clear what she was saying most of the time. The sound kicked on, and then the blinds were raised so we could view the execution room at about 10:31. The spiritual advisor was standing behind Byron Black, who was already on the gurney, like everyone has said, with a blanket more than midway up his body, the gurney being parallel to how we were viewing the execution. So very quickly, he was asked for his last words, and he responded, "No, sir." The spiritual advisor was continuing to say prayers. A number of times, I would say at least 3 or 4, Byron Black picked his head up, kind of looked around, moved his head around a little bit. He exhaled deeply during several of those occasions. At about 10:33, as everyone else has mentioned, the he just says, "Oh, it's hurting so bad." His spiritual advisor replied, "I'm so sorry, just listen to my voice." Shortly after, he groaned again. By 10:35, his head was tilted towards the spiritual advisor in the other direction from where we were. And after that point, I don't recall seeing Byron Black move again or interact in any way. I will say that how he was restrained, he had what looked like some sort of ace bandage or some sort of brown tape. That sort of tape. He also had sort of a crossbody black restraint that went like an X across him. Couldn't really see what was going on with his legs and feet due to the blanket being up over him. At 10:41, the blinds were closed, and at 10:43, there was an announcement that he had been declared dead, and someone announced that the sentence had been carried out by the state.
Steve Cavendish from the Nashville Banner. I don't have any other details to add other than I just wanted to speak up and say that it was unanimous among all of us that we saw him in distress and we heard him in distress after the administration of the pentobarbital had begun. Several minutes afterwards, the quotes were, as everyone else has said, "Oh, this hurts so bad, and I'm so sorry." So there was a fair amount of difference between this and last execution. Thanks.
Good morning, I'm Kelly Henry, and I'm lead counsel for Byron Black. I agree with everything that everyone said about what happened inside the official witness room, but I want to share with you what happened this morning and what happened before the curtains opened. I was with Byron this morning from about 6:45 until 9 a.m. And then again, the spiritual advisor and I were called in to witness the cell extraction and the strap down and the IV insertion. We had a church service this morning with the spiritual advisor and myself and Mr. Black. She gave us Holy Communion. We read scripture and shared stories. I asked Byron about whether or not he was going to want to give a final statement, and he said, I've always been shy. That's just not who I am. I don't want to say anything out there. But he had some messages that he wanted delivered that I'd like to deliver. He wanted his family and friends to know, and this is a quote, "I love you, and I won't never forget you. All of our relationships have been very special. It was my pleasure in meeting everybody and the way we connected with each other. God bless you, and thank you." And to his legal team, who I know is watching this live stream, keep doing what you're doing. God gave you a gift. You have power, and I can feel it. At 10 a.m., the spiritual advisor and I were invited back into the area where Mr. Black was kept in his cell. He was seated on his bed upright. We couldn't see the cell extraction. They directed us to a spot where our view was obstructed, but we could hear the cuffs being placed on his arms and legs, and then we saw him being led from the cell. He had to be held up by both arms. There was a guard on either side sort of holding him because his feet don't really work. They lifted him onto the gurney and strapped him to the gurney at that point. At 10:07, we entered the execution chamber, where they began the process of strapping him down. That process took from 10:08 until 10:14. So that gives you a sense of how many straps and how hard they were. After the strap down team finished, an official wearing an earpiece like a security guard checked each strap to make sure that it was very tight. At 10:15, the IV team came in to begin the process of putting in the IVs. The IV on the right side seemed to go in okay. There was a lot of blood from that site, but they cleaned it up pretty quickly, and I didn't see any blood continue to ooze. That was not the case on the left side. They clearly had a difficult time getting an IV on the left side. They had to bring out some sort of medical device. I guess it was to try to determine how to get a good vein. It took some time before they were able to get the device in. It was at 10:27 in my notes that the device was finally in. Yeah, sorry, and I apologize. It was 10:25 when they finished the second IV. And at some point when they were trying to hand the IV person on the left side, they started to hand her a blue syringe, and she asked for a pink one. I have no idea what that means, but I'm just letting you know. She gave some sort of signal by pointing her finger at 10:24, 10:25, walked away. At 10:26, another member of the team wrapped Mr. Black's hands. At 10:27, they put 3 EKG strips on Mr. Black. At 10:28, they signaled that the EKG strips were in place. At 10:29 was when they put the sheet on Mr. Black. His spiritual advisor told him, "You're almost home." At 10:30, they started to tell us to leave the room. I heard the rest of what everyone else said. I heard him saying it hurt so much. I heard it hurt so much twice. I saw his stomach rising and falling. I heard sounds of difficulty breathing. I saw the rock at 10:36. At 10:38, I heard some noise that I thought sounded like breathing, but I just wrote in my notes, long breath sound. At 10:43, there was the notation that, or the announcement that he had been pronounced deceased. I would note that I'm told that in the past they've said no breath sounds, no heart sounds before declaring death. That was not said today. It was just that he was declared dead, and I have no idea if anyone looked at the EKG strips or where the EKG strip would be. It's not in the execution chamber. I was in that room. The strips for the EKG come out through the wall, and so whoever has the EKG tapes and is looking at the strips is not in the chamber. So if the doctor was in the chamber, he wasn't looking at the EKG strips when he declared death. We'll certainly be getting those EKG strips through subpoena, and there will be an autopsy. And I have a formal statement. What happened here was the result of pure, unbridled bloodlust and cowardice. It was the brutal and unchecked abuse of government power. It was the result of a failed criminal legal system that countenanced and even rewarded attorneys who told half-truths and untruths. Today, the state of Tennessee killed a gentle, kind, fragile, intellectually disabled man in a violation of the laws of our country simply because they could. No one in a position of power, certainly not the courts, was willing to stop them. And if you think that what happened today is just about one man, you are wrong. We are witnessing the erosion of the rule of law and every principle of human decency on which this country was founded. Today, it is Byron. Tomorrow, it will be someone you care about. The people who made this happen are not telling the public the truth. They should feel shame, but they seem incapable. I represented Byron Black for 25 years, and for 25 years, every visit with Byron was filled with stories of family. He would fill me in on the milestones of his sisters, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, and cousins. He was so proud of them. Every year since 1965, Byron's huge extended family would come from all 50 states for family reunions. Each of the 37 years he was incarcerated, they would remember Byron at those reunions, and his sisters would fill them in on gatherings. Last night, Byron spoke of the family reunion that he would have with his ancestors in heaven. I asked him what he thought it would be like to see his mom. He said, "She will run to me and pull me in my arms and say, 'Son, I've been waiting for you.'" Byron was a person who cared about other people. He was proud of the fact that he never missed a birthday. Each January, he would take out a makeshift calendar and write down everyone's birthday so that he could be sure and send them a card. His friends in Unit 2, who are hurting so badly today, would help him with this task. Last night, Byron spoke of the birthday cards and how people always appreciated them. "I touched so many people," he said. Then he said, "You have a birthday coming up. I'm sorry I won't be able to send you a card, but I'll be thinking about you." He expressed gratitude to his legal team, all of his supporters, and to the prison staff who had been so very kind to him while he was on death watch. Byron left this world with words of grace, mercy, and love. I wish I could share these sentiments. I do not. The state of Tennessee heartlessly and intentionally traumatized a second family today, a family that matters, a family that is devastated. May God have mercy on their souls. I know He has mercy for Byron.
If you guys want to take any questions, if you come to the podium as a group, do you guys want to ask the media any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jonathan, I wonder if we could talk to you. You have witnessed several of these executions, different kinds of drugs, different times, different methods. What particularly stood out to you in this one more than any other?
Sure. So I witnessed an execution in 2018 that was Billy Ray Irick, and that was a 3-drug series. This is a single dose of pentobarbital. So just based on that, the procedures were different. With the 3-drug series that I witnessed, there was one, each of them had a different purpose, basically, and there was sort of a consciousness check at one point where they yelled out "Billy, Billy" to see if he would react to it. I think they tried to like touch the back or touch the his eyelashes to see if he would react, those sort of things. That doesn't happen with the pentobarbital because it's one drug administered, and that's pretty much the whole process here. I will say that the spiritual advisor is new to me. I did not witness Oscar Smith's execution. I understand that there was a spiritual advisor there too, but that was new to see that person in the execution chamber as well. And I also witnessed the 2019 execution of Stephen West, and that was by electric chair, which is a totally different process with a different protocol and all of that.
In terms of the physical reaction, though, particularly with the lethal injections, what stood out to you? What was different this time than others?
Byron Black did pick his head up several times, looked around. He made the comment that it was hurting so bad. That was audible. Those were notable. Billy Ray Irick was the only other lethal injection I had witnessed, and his reaction was not necessarily, he gave a final statement. You could see his body moving up and down, and those sort of things. It looked different, but also different procedure, different drugs, and there was a long pause in between executions because that 3-drug series, there were issues with that, and accountability measures and that sort of thing.
You guys talked about his chest rising and dropping. Were there any sudden jolts, any sudden movements? Was that just a steady rate where his chest was rising and falling, or were there any sudden movements?
Does anybody want to take that one? I don't recall seeing a jerk upward of his chest or anything like that. The movements that I saw were mainly his head coming up a few times, 3 or 4 times, maybe more. Anybody else?
I agree.
If possible, Steve mentioned that there was a unanimous kind of decision or unanimous agreement that he was in distress. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, as a witness, we can only say so much because we can't say exactly how he was feeling, but we all did get out of there and speak in a room for about 5 minutes and go over the notes that we all took, and it was unanimous. The notes that we said about his audible gasps, the head coming up, there was clearly something that was going on with him. I wouldn't use the word distress, but we were all in agreement that there was a sort of discomfort that was going on during administration. And you also can't refute the fact that he did out loud say, "I can't do this. It hurts so bad."
Kelly, would it be possible to ask you a question as well? Are you finished? Yeah. Well, I don't know. No, we're not.
Let's do the media question,
Okay.
and then you can.
Regarding this execution, there's been a lot of controversy, the main one being the pacemaker. And that's been along the line of questioning whether we were able to tell whether he was suffering or not. Can you attest to any potential suffering on the part of the execution?
Not really, other than what he was saying. I didn't see any physical jolts or movements or anything that was like uncontrollable besides his head, but I think it seemed like he was doing that purposefully. But yeah, just the huffing and puffing. At one point he was like, whew, like, it was audible, but.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the implant. It was both a pacemaker and a defibrillator. During the medical witness testimony a few weeks ago, we heard that it won't be cartoonish like in the movies where they say clear and do the bump. So I wouldn't have anticipated a jolt if it was activated and it did harm him.
The other piece of that too is that the straps across his chest were so heavy and so tight. We really witnessed more breathing kind of from his belly than we did from his chest. It was very hard to see any movement from his chest. His arms were strapped and his hands were taped out so much, so you couldn't, it would be extraordinary if somebody came up out of that position. We couldn't really expect that. So we were really just sort of relying on his comment.
I just agree with what everyone's saying. I mean, you can't speak on behalf of what the person's going through because you don't know what's going on in their mind, but the way that he was strapped down and the way that there seemed to be a gloss over on what I could see in his face, if someone were to be in pain, like he had said himself that he was in, I would imagine that they would be trying to lift their heads and maybe get more comfortable if they were uncomfortable for sure.
So after you finish your questions, you got 1 hour.
directly to what they were describing and how you interpret that.
Sure, I interpret that my client was tortured today, right? What we know from the science is that the pentobarbital itself is painful. It's incredibly alkaline. It destroys the lining of the stomach or of the lungs very, very quickly. And so then you have the pulmonary edema, that's the breathing and stuff that you're seeing. The pain that he said he was experiencing could be from the pentobarbital, it could have been from the defibrillator, that we're not going to know. Hopefully we'll get that defibrillator interrogated and we'll have more information for you once the autopsy is concluded and once we're able to get possession of the defibrillator and take it to our own experts. But this is a classic case of a person who was put through extreme pain through a process of lethal injection. And it's what we've been saying in court for years. And the other important thing I would say that we learned through the science, the testimony that Judge Perkins heard, was that there's a difference between being unresponsive and being unconscious. We know that the pentobarbital will eventually make a person unresponsive. So after about 10:36, and when he became unresponsive, that doesn't mean he was unconscious. It doesn't mean he was unaware or he wasn't experiencing the pulmonary edema and the other effects of what was going on in his body. But the fact that he was able to raise his head several times and express pain tells you that the pentobarbital was not acting the way the state's experts claim it acts. Because if it acts the way they testified to, he wouldn't have been lifting his head. He wouldn't have been saying that he was in pain. And what we don't know, because they covered it up by tying his hands down and by covering his feet, those are the things that an anesthesiologist is going to look for to see if the person is experiencing what's happening to them. And that was covered up.
Okay. Thank you all. That's all of the time we have now. You have 1 hour from now to please leave the premises.